Hi, it's Michael and Anthony here presenting Small Business Banter. A healthy micro and small business sector means a successful economy and a more vibrant society. Small Business Banter is about helping regional business owners better prepare for the current challenges, but also for the next stage of business success. I'm Michael Kerr, founder of Kerr Capital, advisors to business owners. Each week, with Anthony Turner from the Small Business Mentoring Service, we'll interview a different small business expert or a fellow business owner and get them to share their best tips and insights for you, the listeners. Small Business Banter is brought to you from the studios of 104.7 Gippsland FM and is heard across Australia on the Community Radio Network. Thanks also to our supporters, Kerr Capital and the Small Business Mentoring Service. Okay, welcome in Rachel Power to today's edition of Small Business Banter. Rachel is based in Tasmania. She's the owner with her family of the Waterfalls Cafe and Gallery, and no stranger to tourism and small business, but we'll let her talk about the Great Aussie Road Trip that she founded and another business. She's got a couple of other businesses on the horizon for her. Also, so welcome in, Rachel.
Thanks for having me.
And welcome also in co-host Anthony Turner from the Small Business Mentoring Service.
Hi there. Good to be here again.
All right. So, Rachel, just to kick things off, could you just give us a couple of minutes on your background? We'll get into how you made the move to Tassie later, but just where you are today and what businesses you're involved in.
Yeah, sure. So it's a long string of businesses. As most small business entrepreneurs see a need, feel a need. So we bought our business here in Mountfield National Park, our Waterfalls Cafe and Gallery, which is our main business, and we've grown quite substantially in the 8 years that we've had that business. So the visitation for Mountfield National Park has gone from a declining 100,000 people a year, and within the first 4 years, we'd almost doubled that. And 5 of our 8 years here in the business, we've been the fastest growing national park in Tasmania, and we're the ones that people on the mainland don't know. So everyone knows Cradle Mountain, everyone knows Freycinet A, but Mountfield is a very close second and a much better experience.
Well, we won't get into that, but we take your point. You also founded the Great Aussie Road Trip and are working on a couple of new ventures as well.
Yeah, so the Great Aussie Road Trip's sort of taken a bit of not a backseat, but it's evolved. So it started out as my husband, who is a professional photographer, saying to me, I want to photograph Australia. And the first time he said that to me, our 2 children were then 5 and 3 years old, and we had a mortgage and a single income, and I laughed at him for about 2 months before he said, no, honestly, I want to do this, and if you don't make it happen, I'll go on my own without you. So we did.
He's a negotiator.
Yeah. We evolved that into a blog. So we were one of the very first family travel blogs many, many years ago. And when we did our first 4-month trip around Australia, I returned pregnant. We sold the 4-wheel drive and thought that we'd never get the opportunity to do something like that again. But when we actually went back and looked at the blog about 12 months later, we had more followers of the blog 12 months after that adventure than we did actually at the time we were on the road. So it sort of then sparked pretty much the rest of our adventures. So they all started from that point. So we then had 3 children. We went and saw Lake Eyre in flood, and that's where my youngest son took his first steps. And that's when we then discovered Tasmania. So that's what brought us to Tasmania. And we decided that working here was the way to go. And tourism's in my blood. Absolutely love tourism and hospitality. So this was a no-brainer. And from there, we've now turned the blog into Great Aussie Photo Tours, which is my husband's business. So he takes photographic tours throughout the park and through the beautiful Southwest National Park here. And we're just about to embark on Mountfield Retreat, which is a big step for us. It's a multi-million-dollar accommodation and conference centre, but it's a game changer for our location and our community here as well, because that will also be a tourism and hospitality training school for our community.
So you're in boots and all to Mountfield. Just in the stuff I read about you before, the decision to move to Tassie was made in super quick time.
Tassie was the last state to visit in Australia, and within about 2 days, my husband was saying, "That's it, we're moving." And I have to say that comment is something I hear almost daily here in Tassie. All the mainlanders come down and go, "That's it, I'm moving to Tassie." I took a little bit longer, but it was probably about a week for me. And we sat down at a dinner with the tourism operators in beautiful Sheffield, which is up in the north of Tasmania. And it was then that my eyes really were open to the fact that the opportunity that Tasmania holds is so special and so unique, and it just fit us so perfectly. And we'd looked at other places to move. We'd looked at Perth. We'd even looked at Wellington in New Zealand. But when it was Tassie, that was it. We really did not want to leave. So we were here for 9 weeks. So after the first week, it became, well, where do we want to live in Tassie?
Yeah, so Rachel, when you first moved down there, was it an existing business that you bought, or was it a place that you saw and thought, no, we'll start a business here?
Originally, I was actually applying for work. So we were going to do a bit of a role swap. My husband had worked at the National Library in Canberra for more than 17 years, and our children were still quite young. So our youngest was just about 2.5 when we moved, and he was ready to have that time at home with the kids, and I was really, really ready to do something else. There's so many mothers out there that feel it's wrong to want to do something else. But for me, I'm a much happier mother and a much nicer person to be around when I'm doing what I need to do. And for me, that was going back to work. So it was really nice that we were able to do that swap. However, as soon as I left Tasmania, the interviews dried up, and we worked out very quickly that working for someone else was not going to happen while we were on the mainland. I wasn't going to be able to get a job while I was on the mainland. So we changed tack, and that's when I came across the cafe here. So it was already an existing business. It had been run by 2 previous owners before us. And the interesting thing was we stayed in Mountfield, and we all loved it for different reasons. The kids loved it because there was kids everywhere in the campground to play with, and there was animals, and there was easy walks. I loved it because I could relax, and it was warm, and it was comfortable. It was just a really, really welcoming place. My husband loved it because someone told him it was a special gate that hadn't been locked, and he ended up going up into the Alpine areas, and there's no mobile phone reception up there except for one spot, and he found that spot, and he rang me down 20 k's away in the campground, and all I heard was, wow. He had fallen in love with the photographic opportunities that were here. We didn't even know that the cafe was for sale at that stage. We had popped in, but as soon as we then started that process of going, is this the right business for us, and educating ourselves about the rest of Tasmania and what was available, very, very quickly, it was a very, very perfect fit for us.
I love that, Rachel. It's something we talk about quite regularly. This idea of a tree change or a sea change, and it not happening when you're hanging for that job. So this idea of buying a business is a great way to kickstart that. So you bought the business. You run it as a family business. So how old are the kids? Are they involved in part-time jobs in the cafe?
They are sort of. So both of my older 2 girls, my oldest daughter is now 17 and my middle daughter is now 15. And they know it's their job to work with me on Christmas Day, because Christmas Day we open for 2 hours. It is one of the busiest days in the park. And we know how much parents need caffeine on Christmas morning. So we're open for that short period for coffee runs. And my daughters work with me because that's the one day I will never ask my staff to work. That they work every other day of the year, but that's their day with their families. And that's really important for me to be able to offer that. My oldest daughter started working when she was 13, and she was a gun. But now she's reached 17, she doesn't want to do it anymore. So she earns money in other ways. She's now a junior discovery ranger. So parks have recognised her talent and her knowledge of every botanical name of every plant in this national park, and understands every animal and can find where they live. And
she's found her thing.
She has, and being a park ranger was all she wanted from the day she moved here. So she's now a junior discovery ranger. And through this season, because that program has changed with COVID, as everything has, she's actually going to start taking paid tours. So she's turning into a paid tour guide. My middle daughter, Gemma, she too works if she has to, but she's a little artist. So she's actually working on her own website and products that we can actually print onto merchandise that we can actually sell for her in the gallery space that we have here too.
It's interesting you just segued, because I was going to ask you a question about the gallery, because my understanding from the research is that you've got both a cafe and a gallery, and that gallery is very, very supportive of local artisans. So how did you build that up? Was that part of the business when you first started, or is that a new addition that you've taken on board and grown?
So the space itself was existing when we bought the business, but it was what you would expect of any tourist location. It was full of the same thing that every tourist location in Tasmania had. So the very first step that we took when we took over was sell off all the rubbish that we didn't want to sell anymore, and find a way to be different and to stand out, so that travellers who are visiting, and it's what you do when you come to the state. You do Freycinet and you do Cradle Mountain. You do Mount Field first though, and you see something different, so that you're not just picking up the same thing. And our ethos has always been to support local. So my overarching guiding principle is local first. So that is local staff. We don't employ backpackers. We employ seasonal staff, but they're always local and they're from our community. Our local artists are, as much as we can, we get Tasmanian artists, but sometimes there's just some fantastic Australian stuff that we bring in as well. But we still have some of the touristy stuff that people want to see and want to buy. 80% of our gallery is local.
On today's edition, we are talking with Rachel Power from the Waterfalls Cafe and Gallery at Mount Field. A couple of episodes ago, we spoke with Carly Flecknoe from the Grampians in Victoria. She instigated a hashtag Made the Grampians Way, really focusing on that, on local produce, local artists. And so we really get that. And, to the change you made to go down to Tassie and then buying into a business, did that really help integrating into the local community more quickly or more easily?
Yeah, it certainly did. Obviously, everyone here, there's oh look, I've got to say it, everyone in Tasmania is related in some way. It is true.
Well, you're a Tasmanian sort of now, so you can say that.
Well, actually, when I came down here, within the first year, Mum came down and visited, and she said, "Oh, do you want to go see where your relatives are from?" And about 100 k's up the road at Bothwell is where my relatives actually started in Australia. So technically, I can almost call myself a Tasmanian.
Returning home.
That's right. But look, some of the people that I employ, one of my staff is sixth generation, and her family actually owned the national park before it was a national park. So this is the sort of experience that we have here. And that works really well for you, but sometimes it can be challenging as well. It works really well in the ability to train a community. So we have one of Australia's highest youth unemployment rates here. And that's because there's no entry-level jobs. And if there's entry-level jobs, the adults take them because there's no work. So the juniors that come through are not getting those first job skills and confidence and learning those things that they need to learn. So we make a point of doing that with our seasonal staff. So we take in about 8 pre-COVID, and we train at least 8 new kids every year. Often they're straight out of school, year 9 and year 10 levels. And it just is so fantastic to turn that light bulb on and see them actually have aspiration, and looking forward to the future and what they can do and knowing that they can do anything. And that's really, really, really important part of our role here. And because we've dedicated ourselves to do that, we actually get parents bringing their children in with a resume. And so we've never had to advertise. We moved into a second cafe about 10 kilometres up the road from here in Medina. And one of the first things that I did was I visited the other businesses that are in town. And I said, this is me, this is what we do, and this is how we do it. And I'm not interested on stepping on toes. And if I am in any way a problem, then I want to know. And the first response from the general store, which probably would have been our biggest competition there, oh, thank goodness you're here. So that these are people that I had never met before, but that reputation is really, really important in a community, and the reputation of employing locals, of training locals and taking the time to be involved, and then shifting that to another level as well. That was proven again when I ran for council. Everyone here, because it is quite a close-knit community, I knew I'd be okay with votes in the upper Derwent Valley, but the lower Derwent Valley, where the bulk of people are, I wasn't sure if they knew who I was. But I was elected resoundingly, which was a lovely experience, and testament to the fact that if you involve yourself in a community as a newcomer, that you will be welcomed.
Richard, do you think being a business mentor, putting that hat on, it's really encouraging to hear you say about the necessity, particularly in tourism, of actually getting involved in your local community. And I think congratulations on the fact that you're doing that obviously very, very well. In terms of as you're going to grow your business, you mentioned earlier that you're looking at some fairly big expansions with the business. Is the community going to be big enough to be able to support you with that going through, in terms of maintaining that sort of unique brandness and that uniqueness of your business?
At this point, I believe so, because what we're seeing now is a shift. So our community up here was very company town. So it was owned by Hydro when they were building the Gordon Dam and the A&M paper mills with all the trees and the logging. So it has this checkered history of industry that is now pulling out and slowing down, and those jobs don't exist anymore. And so what we had up here was communities facing a downturn in the economic side of things, which was having a literacy problem and the flow-on effect of that. So what we've been doing slowly is taking that economic downturn and turning it into a really strong tourism focus. So when you have a community that's focused on tourism, things change. So they're more likely to go up and say g'day to a complete stranger at the pub, which is what the locals actually will do that now. Makes the pub a whole lot less scary when you're a female walking into a really old country pub with all these blokes, and it's like the traditional door squeaks as you walk in and everyone turns around and looks at you. But now they'll go, g'day. and so that sort of experience coming from the mainland or coming from international is the kind of thing you remember. It's authentic and you cannot put that on. And so that's what we're seeing our community evolving, because they're realising that that's where the jobs of the future are for their children and for their community. That's where our ability to grow is coming from.
It's a theme that keeps popping up, and small businesses at the centre of that. It's corporates, government, can potentially add, bulk numbers of jobs, but it can take a long time and often doesn't happen. But it's integrating yourself like you've done personally and your family into the community through small business is what we're all about. Small business banter. You've taken on an awful lot, but could you speak for the opportunities for others in Tassie? The things that you would encourage them, and in fact, the rest of Australia, that given what you've taken on and what you've learnt about small business, community, youth employment, those sorts of things?
Yeah, I think a lot of people are scared to take a risk, and there's good risk and bad risk, and everyone's risk appetite is different. When we first took over the business here, my husband's risk appetite was very, very low. And if I had said to him then, we're going to build a multi-million-dollar project, he would have run a mile. But when you're in business, you learn the good risk and the bad risk. So sometimes you just need to make that decision to take the first step, but you need to be educated on that first step. So as I said earlier, I knew everything about Tasmania. I knew everything about the businesses that were for sale in Tasmania, and I knew what my capabilities were.
So that's your way of de-risking, by knowing who's who, but also a calculated risk in terms of the future. If you could get more visitors to Mount Field, which is obviously a stunning place, that you benefit, but also everybody else, the other business operators, they sound like they saw that also.
Yes, and what we're seeing now is a growth in the small business industry here. So we've got lots of Airbnbs and lots of B&Bs popping up. So people are now choosing this for their lifestyle, and that's the big difference. So I might say this is a lifestyle for me, but I work 7 days a week. We're now getting that Melbourne and Sydney and Brisbane crowd who are just sick of the traffic, the people, the noise, the pollution. We have the cleanest air in the world. They're coming to Tasmania because they can see the lifestyle and the opportunity. So it's not just Tasmania that has that, though. There are so many regional and rural areas that have that opportunity for people who are willing to give it a go, but know that it's going to be hard work. But as long as it fits you and your ability, then it's not hard work, it's enjoyable work.
One of the things that I keep hearing and dealing with regional communities right across Australia is that there's often this embedded sort of what I call the football mentality, whereby Town A has always been a foe with Town B or Town C and all that sort of thing. And they tend to look at competition. But what I'm hearing from you is very clearly the benefits of working collaboratively with others in the community and getting rid of that competition mentality and looking at that sort of cooperation mentality. Is that a fair assessment?
It is a fair assessment. I keep saying Cradle Mountain and Freycinet. That is absolutely my competition, but it's a fun competition. So I spend a lot of time. So a lot of the places there are they're owned by bigger businesses, and an RACT, and here we have a big hotel group, the Federal Group, who own a lot of the bigger hotels across the state, and those two locations have big hotel groups. Our location doesn't. And that's the biggest difference. So this is a group of small businesses taking on the big guys, and we love being the underdogs, which is why we always spruik that competition. But I've actually sat around tables with the owners of those big businesses, and they're there to help and support us. And Tasmania has that mentality, more so than anywhere else in Australia that I've seen. Here in the Derwent Valley, for instance, it's small business dominated. So if the small businesses don't work together, it's a really tough gig. And here alone, there's only so much freezer space, and you can never tell how many bus groups are going to turn up for the day. So inevitably you run out of something. And that's when you get on the phone to the roadhouse up at Westaway, which is 10 Ks, or to the pub, which is just up the road. Have you got any hot chips? I'm out of $2 coins. Can you help me? Because they will do the same thing. And so we support each other because it's an hour trip into Hobart from here, which doesn't sound much for mainland.
You don't want to be doing that more than you need to when you've got such a lovely place to live and run a business in. We're coming up to about the end of our time, unfortunately, Rachel. I know you've taken on a lot. Your advice to other business owners in terms of looking after yourself, and also a couple of just quick comments on the people you admire in small business that you draw inspiration and learnings from over the next minute or so. If you could wrap it up, it'd be great.
Sometimes you got to step out of your business to know what you've got. And you've got to get up on the balcony and look from above at the whole big picture. Because if you're on the ground all the time, you're going to burn out. But when you can step out and look from above, that's when you realise that mentors are really important people and the effect that they have on your business as well. So I don't have an individual person or group of people, but I have been lucky enough to be on the board of the Tourism Industry Council, which has had some of the biggest heavyweights in Tasmania who are there to help. And you never know who's going to be able to help you until you ask. So don't be afraid to gather information from as many other people who have already done it as you can.
Excellent advice. And I think very much along the lines of where Anthony was going, which is this cooperation. We get more people in Tasmania, you're all better off. Look, we thoroughly enjoyed our discussion today, Rachel. Thank you so much for your time. It was Rachel Power from Waterfalls Cafe and Gallery, plus numerous other businesses. We didn't get to talk about your heritage printing business. Perhaps another time we'll do that. But we really do wish you well and thank you for your time today, Rachel.
Thanks so much for having me.
All the best. So that's all for today's episode of Small Business Banter. Anthony and I continue to be inspired by bringing you small business experts and other small business owners and hearing their stories. For any of the links, resources or information we've talked about on the show today, or to contact Anthony or myself, please head over to smallbusinessbanter.com, or you can find us on both Facebook and Instagram. Anthony and I would love you to tune in at the same time next week for another episode of Small Business Banter.